Helen Brock had survived 3 CEOs, 4 corporate pivots, and 1 fire drill that involved a smoke machine and a broken elevator. But nothing prepared her for Travis Ellison. She crossed the square just as the sun slipped between red bronze branches, the late October air sharp enough to make her tug her scarf a little tighter. Juniper's Brew had the door propped open with a pumpkin-shaped stopper. Inside, the air smelled of dark roast and cinnamon scones. The barista greeted her with a nod, already pouring her usual hazelnut drip splash of cream, he said, sliding it across without a word about the weather. That's how she liked it. Efficient. Familiar easy. She tucked 2 folded dollar bills into the tip jar and gave him the soft smile of someone who'd been tipping in cash since before mobile apps existed. Back outside, the trees along Main Street looked like fire suspended in air. She sipped slowly, savoring the contrast of warm drink and cool wind. Her heels made the faintest tap on the sidewalk as she walked the half-block back to Meridian Tech's modest brick building, once a local telecom, now a global logistics giant in constant reinvention. In her office on the 3rd floor, Helen paused a moment. The framed photo on her shelf was slightly crooked again. First day at Meridian, 17 years ago. She looked so young standing with her onboarding badge and awkward blazer. She resisted the urge to straighten it. Let it lean. Wind chimes just outside the narrow window gave a faint jingle. The sound made her think of porch mornings and Sunday crossword puzzles. The printed kind, not the apps her younger co-workers tapped away at during lunch. She opened her drawer. The week's puzzle, half filled in blue ink, rested beside a ceramic mug from a 2005 industry conference in Atlanta. The mug had a small chip at the lip and a hairline crack down one side, but it still held pens just fine. The sound came before the man clicking rapid footsteps sharp on the tile like punctuation. Then came Travis Ellison, freshly appointed CEO, striding through the hallway with a leather tablet case and no pause in his pace. He didn't glance into offices, didn't nod, just moved forward like the hallway was already his. Helen watched from behind her frosted glass door. She didn't expect a greeting. CEOs came and went. They arrived fast and wanted things faster. Travis looked even younger in person than in the press photo, mid-30s athletic frame, a hint of a tan like he'd just left a West Coast startup. His suit was tailored too tight to be old money, and his haircut was just this side of trying too hard. 10 minutes later, the first all-hands meeting was announced via calendar invite, company vision alignment mandatory. It was Travis's first directive. The conference room was already full when Helen arrived. Slipping into her usual seat near the back, Travis stood at the front, sleeves rolled just enough to seem relatable. The screen behind him lit up with graphs and phrases like effortless efficiency and legacy realignment. He didn't ask for introductions, didn't mention names. Meridian has a strong past, he began. But strong pasts can trap us. We're not a museum. We're a machine. Machines get tuned or replaced. Somewhere near the front. Someone coughed. Helen took a sip from her travel mug. Travis clicked through slides like he was flipping TV channels. Goals, objectives, partnerships, automation. There were no pauses, no space for feedback. The younger employees scribbled in stylized notebooks or tapped their phones, nodding like fans at a TED Talk. The older ones, Gloria included, sat still, expressions unreadable. After the meeting, Helen stepped out into the hallway. Travis passed by chatting with 2 bright-eyed department heads. He didn't see her. Or if he did, he didn't register her as more than part of the wallpaper. Later that afternoon back at Juniper's, Helen sat at the corner window seat. The barista wordlessly topped off her cup. Outside, the breeze picked up scattering dry leaves in brief tumbling spirals. She watched them dance for a while, then headed back, walking slower than usual. The sky was dimming early, the season changing by the hour. Back at her desk, the office had grown quieter, the ambient hum of typing and calls beginning to taper. She leaned back in her chair, letting her eyes drift toward the corner of the filing cabinet, where a red folder had sat undisturbed for months. Travis's voice drifted through the vent above. He was talking to someone outside her range of view. "We'll trim some of the deadwood soon. You know, legacy stuff." Her breath stayed even. She blinked once, then turned toward the cabinet. Without a word, she opened the drawer, pulled the red folder out, and placed it on her desk. The tab read, "Client Relationship History." Back at her desk. Helen silently pulls a red folder labeled Client Relationship History from her cabinet. When the HR director offers coffee before a meeting, it's either your promotion or your goodbye. Helen stood outside the glass-walled conference room for a moment longer than she needed to, fingers curled lightly around the ceramic handle of a travel mug that had long gone cold. Through the glass, she saw Gloria seated already, posture too formal. Hands resting on a beige envelope that looked out of place against the dark wood table. There were no other materials, no laptop, no notes. Just the envelope and a white paper cup with a green cardboard sleeve. She stepped inside with the calm of someone who had already accepted the weather report. Before stepping into the storm, Travis looked up from a printout, the corners of his mouth pulling into a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning, Helen," he said. "Please have a seat." "Coffee." She declined with a slight tilt of her head, moving to the seat across from him. The room was colder than it should have been. The building's heating system had always been slow to adjust to seasonal changes. One of the many small things that never made it into leadership reports. Travis cleared his throat and looked down at the page in front of him. "Thank you for coming. I'll get right to it. We've been conducting a review of departmental functions, particularly in light of the updated global efficiency strategy. As you know, streamlining is an ongoing priority." There it was. The first use. Gloria shifted slightly in her chair, eyes downcast. "We've concluded that certain roles, while important in previous phases, no longer align with the current trajectory. Unfortunately, your position falls under that category." Second use. Helen nodded once, slowly. She didn't blink more than usual. She didn't move toward the coffee. She didn't ask a single question. Travis glanced at Gloria, who slid the envelope across the table. The sound it made soft paper against varnished wood was final in its quiet. "We're offering a comprehensive severance package," Gloria added, voice tight but kind. 2 months' salary, unused vacation, and transitional support if needed. Helen rested her hand on the envelope but didn't open it. "Thank you," she said, looking directly at Gloria. "Not Travis." "You've been an important part of the company," Travis said, sounding like someone rehearsing condolences at a wake. She smiled faintly. "For 17 years, yes." Outside, the clouds hung low and heavy. Through the slanted blinds, the hallway lights cast long gray reflections on the conference table. Helen stood tucking the envelope under her arm, still unopened. She paused at the door and turned her head just slightly. "You should double-check the Mandarin phrasing in the Gold Peak transition brief," she said. "It's easy to lose tone across dialects." Travis looked puzzled. Gloria's lips pressed into a thin, regretful smile. Helen walked out before either of them responded. The hallway was empty, though she could hear voices muffled behind closed doors. She passed the reception desk where a plastic bowl of leftover Halloween candy sat untouched. The paper ghost decorations still fluttered faintly from the air vents. A little sad now that November had arrived. Near the elevator, Min-jae stood frowning down at his tablet. His suit was a little too big at the shoulders, his lanyard twisted backward. She slowed. "Recurring invites?" she asked. He startled slightly, then nodded. "I keep duplicating the Thursday team huddles and deleting the originals by accident. Classic sync issue," Helen said gently. "You're selecting add all future events. But what you want is edit series. Scroll to the bottom menu, choose this and future." He looked relieved. "Thank you. I thought I broke something." "Not yet," she replied, then tapped twice on the tablet to confirm the fix. "Just be careful. Calendars are less forgiving than people." He glanced up. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "You're new," she said, cutting the apology off with a soft tone. "That's what new is for." She left him blinking after her as the elevator opened with its usual clunk and sigh. Juniper's brew was quiet by mid-afternoon. The regulars had thinned out, leaving just a couple in the corner sharing a crossword, and a man with silver headphones tapping his foot to something faintly audible. The barista gave her a nod and poured her usual without asking. "Long day," he said. She simply nodded. The cafe smelled like nutmeg and pine cones. Someone had lit a cinnamon candle near the pastry case. A few small gift baskets, coffee tins wrapped in plaid ribbons sat near the counter, early prep for Thanksgiving week. Helen took her seat by the window. The one in the corner with the narrow ledge where she could watch the drugstore across the street slowly rotate its window display from skeletons to Santa hats. The first strand of Christmas lights had gone up that morning, haphazard and half-lit. She reached into her bag, took out the beige envelope and placed it on the table. Her fingers brushed the edges, smoothing the corners as though the paper deserved dignity. She didn't open it. Not yet. It wasn't unread because it was unimportant. It was unread because it wasn't urgent. Her career, her years, her work. None of it lived inside a printed paragraph. Her phone buzzed once. A name appeared. "Leang Dewey." The message was brief. "Can we speak Monday before the board call?" Helen didn't smile, but she exhaled long and even. Helen watches a small string of Christmas lights flicker in the cafe window as Nat King Cole sings Unforgettable. Monday morning began with stale coffee, shaky slides, and an empty seat that no one dared mention. Conference Room B had been polished to the point of discomfort. The high-gloss table reflected every overhead light, and the chairs had been arranged in an almost surgical precision. On the far wall, a digital clock glowed a muted red, 9:52 a.m. A tray of store-bought muffins sat untouched near the coffee urn, their cellophane wrapping already fogged. Travis stood near the screen, flipping through slides too quickly for even his assistant to follow. Martin and Kara, the two newest analysts he'd brought in from his former consultancy, sat at his flanks. Both had the taut alertness of people trying very hard to appear relaxed. On the display charts, pie slices in shades of blue, acronyms. No one had time to decode. The words streamlining partnerships, centralized communication, and efficiency. Onboarding rotated like wallpaper. "Today marks a new era," Travis declared, voice buoyant. "With leaner processes, we can better serve our global alliances, especially long-term partners like..." The door opened. "Mr. Dewey." Leang entered with the quiet gravity of someone used to being underestimated. He was flanked by two senior advisors, both older, both wearing dark suits that looked subtly out of place amid Travis's fitted blazer and modernized dress shoes. Travis smiled broadly. "Mr. Liang, so glad you made it. Please sit." The delegation did not sit. "We expected..." "Ms. Brock," Mr. Liang said calmly. "Not accusatory, just stating fact." Travis's smile faltered for half a breath, then returned. Helen has well transitioned to a new chapter, but rest assured our team is fully briefed. Martin here has been reviewing the latest touch points. Mr. Liang raised one hand. No sharpness, just finality. Without her, there's no deal. Travis blinked. I'm sure we can clarify. Some. The two advisors had already turned toward the door. We appreciate your time, Mr. Liang said, and closed his folder. It made a quiet snapping sound, like a book being shut at the end of a disappointing story. They left in silence. The elevator took too long. When the doors finally closed behind them, Travis turned slowly toward Martin and Kara. No one spoke. Down the hall, someone's phone rang. A moment later, another chime echoed. And then another. The CFO's number flashed on Travis's watch screen. He ignored it, which only made it worse. Across town, sunlight spilled across a different conference table, this one smaller, more lived in. A window looked out over a frozen pond where ducks sat huddled in tight clusters. Helen Brock sipped from a pale green mug she'd been offered that morning. The office smelled faintly of vanilla hand lotion and copy paper. Someone had put on jazz in the background. Billie Holiday, something slow and full of space. Her phone buzzed gently. A message from Gloria. They're in freefall. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened her email and clicked into a form titled Silverbridge Onboarding Packet. At the top, upload new staff photo. She tapped the camera icon, angled her phone toward the window, and smiled. Not wide, just enough. Meanwhile, back at Meridian Tech, Kara was flipping through notes in growing panic. Martin was half out of his seat, glancing between the empty screen and Travis's rapidly paling face. Should we? He began. No, Travis snapped. They'll come back around. We just need to reposition the proposal, but no one believed it. The air had shifted, not broken, but buckling, and no one dared to move first. By noon, the investor line had called twice. The board assistant scheduled a closed meeting to review contingency options. The receptionist at Gold Peak refused to answer any calls from numbers listed under Meridian Tech's domain. Someone in logistics joked that the IT department had started backing up servers labeled phase-out. It wasn't funny. That afternoon, as the wind picked up along the square, Helen stepped into Juniper's brew. The door chimed softly. The barista greeted her with the kind of quiet familiarity that never needed words. The cafe was warm, full of holiday notes, clove cinnamon, something sweet baking in the back. Billie Holiday still sang somewhere in the corner. Helen didn't ask for the music, but she appreciated that it was there. She sat by the same window she always did. Across the street, the drugstore had added fake snow to the display window. A felt reindeer wore a crooked scarf. She pulled out her planner and opened it carefully, as if the pages might remember the weight of her pen. Then, in steady ink, she circled a date Thursday, November 23rd, Thanksgiving in ink. The email arrived just before sunset, subject line. Ree would appreciate a quick conversation. Helen spotted it between messages from her new onboarding coordinator and a confirmation for her Silverbridge keycard pickup. The sender address was familiar, though it had never sent her anything before. No greeting in the body, just a single sentence. Let me know if you have 15 minutes to reconnect this week. She didn't reply right away. Outside the town square was softening into early evening. The holiday lights along the lampposts blinked unevenly. Some gold, some blue, a few still unlit. In the distance, someone was playing a trumpet, slowly working through scales beside the frozen fountain. She let the sound float into the quiet of her apartment. She folded her laptop closed and reached for a small leather-bound notepad from the desk drawer. No initials, no branding, just smooth paper and a pen that had weight. At the top of a clean page, she wrote, "Meeting with Travis, Tuesday." She didn't write why. The next morning, Helen arrived at Juniper's Brew earlier than usual. The barista gave her a look, one of those unspoken checks that pass between longtime customers and quiet professionals. "Try the ginger scones today," he said, sliding over her coffee. "Fresh batch." She nodded, accepted it, and reached into her coat pocket, not for her wallet, but for a small envelope. Inside was a single Earl Grey tea bag wrapped and tied with a loop of green thread. She tucked it beside her cup before taking a seat near the window. Her phone buzzed once, a message from Gloria. It was short, direct, and devoid of any pretense. "See attached internal projections, confidential." Helen tapped the file open. A table of numbers filled the screen, columns marked Gold Peak Forecast Account, Attrition Risk, Strategic Fallout. The figure at the bottom had been circled digitally in red, $22,000, $1,000. She sipped her coffee, then closed the message. Later that afternoon, she arrived at the library. The room had once been used by Meridian Tech for new hire training sessions. It hadn't been touched in years. The walls still held outdated motivational posters, teamwork vision, integrity, all printed with fonts long abandoned. A dusty whiteboard leaned against one side of the room. Travis was already there, pacing slightly near the window. He looked like he hadn't slept, shirt collar, rumpled tie, half-loosened face pale in the washed-out light. "Helen," he said too brightly. "Thanks for coming." She stepped inside without a word and sat at the rectangular table in the center of the room. The chair creaked beneath her as if remembering the weight of a different time. He remained standing, hands fluttering through invisible bullet points. "Listen, I think there were a few misunderstandings, missteps maybe, with Gold Peak. But that's how transitions work, right? Some friction." She opened her notebook. He didn't seem to notice. "They've gone cold. You probably heard, but I think we can rebuild. If we can demonstrate that we still..." Helen set her pen down. He stopped. She looked at him, not coldly, but not gently either. "I'm not here to rebuild your confidence, Travis," she said, voice even. "I'm here to offer structure, but only if it benefits the people you ignored, the partners, not you." His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked like he might argue, but the weight of her tone flattened the attempt before it began. "I'll consult," she continued, "but only for your partners, not for your comfort." Silence stretched between them like a drawn thread. After a beat, he nodded once awkwardly. "Understood." She rose, gathering her coat without rushing. The tea bag from Juniper's was still tucked in her inside pocket, untouched. It wasn't meant to be used. By the time she returned to the cafe, the lights outside had brightened. Snow hadn't started yet, but the smell in the air had changed, clear, brittle like a held breath. The barista had saved her corner seat. The record player was spinning something slow and brass-heavy in the background. She took out her notepad, opened it to the same page, and wrote 2 words beneath her morning notes. "Terms accepted." The welcome desk said, "Temporary access badge in bright red ink." That suited Helen just fine. She clipped the badge to her lapel with the same precision she'd once reserved for handwritten place cards at client dinners. The receptionist, younger than some of the mugs in Helen's kitchen, smiled nervously and gestured toward a workstation near the back of the floor. It was a cubicle, glass-walled, barely insulated from the surrounding noise, with a lopsided chair and a spider plant whose leaves had browned at the tips. Helen thanked her with genuine warmth. The office buzz wasn't quite gone, but it had changed. Voices were softer now, not from courtesy, but caution. Holiday garlands hung along the tops of cubicle dividers, green tinsel and plastic cranberries. but their brightness looked more like denial than cheer. The silence between sentences lasted just a fraction too long. Everyone typed a little louder than needed. She set her bag down and opened her portfolio. Inside was the printed memo from Gloria, projected losses flagged concerns and margins in red ink. She'd highlighted phrases, annotated with small notes in her looping, upright handwriting. She wasn't here to confront. She was here to redirect. The first thing she requested was access to the shared contract archive. Martin approved it without question. He didn't make eye contact. The files were a mess, templates over templates, poor translations, bullet point promises that had no business being sent to international partners. She sifted through them without comment, flagging clauses that would raise red flags in East Asian corporate etiquette, a paragraph using colloquial metaphors, a signature line formatted backwards. At noon, she picked up her phone and stepped into a quiet alcove near the break room. The old brass elevator button was mounted just above her eye line. She reached up and pressed it, not to summon the elevator, but just to feel the metal. It hadn't changed. She dialed Mr. Liang's private number. When he answered, she spoke in Mandarin, slow and respectful. "I am here temporarily," she said. "I want you to know I'm watching the process. They haven't fixed anything." There was a pause on the other end. "Then we trust your judgment." She didn't smile, but she breathed a little easier. That afternoon, a notice pinged through Meridian Tech's client portal. A longtime partner had just updated their profile, redirecting their communications to Silverbridge Consulting. Helen marked the change, saved the confirmation, and moved on to the next file. In the hallway outside legal, Gloria appeared at her elbow, walking at just the right pace to suggest coincidence. Her voice barely registered. "Things vanish quickly around here," she murmured. "Backups don't always survive." She slipped a small USB drive into Helen's hand and didn't stop walking. Helen didn't look down. She didn't need to. Later that day, she sat quietly in the back of the board presentation. Travis stood near the screen again, trying to make bullet points sound like strategy. Martin clicked too quickly through a deck that lacked structure. Kara whispered a correction about the quarterly numbers, but Travis waved her off. He mentioned new partner reintegration models. He didn't mention Helen once. And yet when he stumbled through the Q&A, fumbling a response to an investor representative dialing in remotely, eyes drifted not toward the screen, but toward the woman in the back with the red badge and the closed notebook. Helen said nothing. She didn't need to. By 5, the office lights had dimmed slightly. Automatic sensors trying to save energy. Helen passed the old mailroom on her way out. It still smelled like toner and paper dust. Someone had taped a cutout turkey to the inside of the window, but one wing had folded over on itself. At home, she removed her coat, lit a cinnamon-scented candle, and set the USB drive on her kitchen table. She poured hot water over a sachet of chamomile and waited as the steam curled upward in soft spirals. Then, opening her laptop, she composed a short email. Subject: final phase body ready. Helen. She hit send. That night, Helen lights a cinnamon candle, pours tea and emails Silverbridge. Ready for final phase Thanksgiving morning. A light snow falls. The silence outside is comforting. Helen makes tea before dawn. The kettle clicked off just as the first gray of morning pushed at the window panes. The streets outside were still brushed with powdery white. No cars passed. No footsteps. Just a hush that felt earned. Helen moved slowly through the kitchen, placing her cup on the windowsill as she wrapped herself in a cardigan that had once belonged to her mother. The soft shuffle of Billie Holiday played from the radio, crackling just slightly in the quiet. She opened the pantry and took out a pie. baked the night before wrapped in waxed paper still warm to the touch. Pumpkin with clove and ginger, and a lattice crust she'd pinched together by hand. It was for Juniper's Brew. They always opened for half a day on Thanksgiving just for locals, as the sign said. The folder marked client relationship history. Once read, now faded at the corners, sat inside a sealed banker's box under her desk. She had labeled it Legacy in neat block letters. It would go to storage with the rest of her archived documents alongside vacation postcards, spare mug sleeves, and a printed copy of her first email with Mr. Liang. Some things you kept, not to use again, but to remember that you'd once mattered in places that forgot too fast. At 7:12 a.m., her phone rang. Travis. She let it ring once, then again. Then she picked up. "Happy Thanksgiving, Helen," he said, overly cheerful. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Just tea," she replied. "Good," he said too quickly. "Listen, I wanted to touch base. We've been thinking, and I believe there's an opportunity to formalize your role a bit. Maybe something like strategic advisor, informal title, of course, but with visibility." She let a beat pass. "I think the board would respond positively," he added, "if you'd be open." She looked toward the window where the snow had started falling a little faster now, the flakes larger, lazier. "No, thank you," she said gently. There was silence on the other end. Then a stiff exhale. "Is this about—" "No," she said. "This is about everything." He didn't respond. The line crackled once, then fell quiet. She ended the call. A few minutes later, her inbox chimed. "From Gloria P. Subject, update. Body. They've frozen all leadership bonuses. Just thought you'd want to know." Helen didn't reply. She closed the lid of her laptop and pulled on her boots. Juniper's Brew was warm even before she stepped inside. A small sign near the register read, "Local Pies Welcome." The barista looked up from the espresso machine and grinned. "You beat the rush," he said. She handed him the pie. "For the staff. I'll save you a corner piece," she smiled, then moved to her usual spot near the window, where the light slanted in low and golden, softened by snowfall and fogged glass. She'd only just opened her planner when the door chimed again. This time it was Minjae. He was holding a small orchid in a ceramic pot, white petals, a ribbon around the base. "I wasn't sure what to bring," he said sheepishly. I wanted to thank you." She raised an eyebrow. "They told me to go quiet," he said. "But you told me to speak smart. That's why you're here now. That's why they're calling you, not the others." She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a mug, ceramic navy blue, slightly chipped at the rim. "Here," she said, handing it to him. "From the office?" "You'll need a sturdy one." He took it with both hands. "Thank you, Ms. Brock." She nodded. "Take care of the place, or leave when it stops taking care of you." He nodded again, then turned and left, leaving the orchid on the table like a thank you card that wouldn't fade. Back home, she reopened her laptop. One final file remained, a shared drive access point tied to Meridian Tech's legacy system. She hovered a moment, then clicked Delete Access. A soft ping followed subject Asia-Pacific client kickoff meeting. Monday. She clicked open The Future Fits just right. The snow fell gently that morning, soft as breath, wrapping the town in a hush that made every small kindness feel louder. In the stillness, a woman who had once been dismissed as obsolete found herself remembered, respected, not because she demanded it, but because she never stopped listening. Kindness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks in quiet corrections, in mugs passed forward, in the patience to let time reveal what others miss. Judging by titles or tempo alone, blinds us to the steady hands holding everything together. If this story lingers in you, let it remind you, the quietest voices often carry the strongest truths, and like lanterns left in windows, they wait glowing for those who know where to look.